Good evening, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital, nightly strategy podcast for Sunday night, January 8th, 2023. There are no charts posted, but I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping tonight. So, the Creativity 202 course is turning out to be our coaching program. Today's session with the Euros was just absolutely amazing. We're talking about high performance creativity. The 2.5 hour video session is on Patreon for subscribers. This week's lesson was taking a look at what the effect of pressure on creative processes are, and there were a lot of powerful insights in there. One of them was that when you look at our standard framing of the zero state, we imagine a framework with two dimensions. One of them is a time dimension where you have past, present, and future, so you have time going from left to right. And then from bottom to top, you have this area of joy to despair to some kind of neutral or calmness here in the middle. And so we have identified that when you think about your ideal mind state for shorter term trading, I would say, especially, for me, that happens to be at that little spot where I have a slightly forward-looking mentality. I'm not like absolutely in this particular moment, but it includes this moment and the next set of bars for the next leg or two, so that I can be focused on the areas where my management can make a difference. And then I need to have a state of indifference to the particular trade emotionally, so that I'm not dragged into either despair or joy. In the Foundations course, the psychology course, there's one in there that walks through this in great detail. And we remember moments when we were concerned about too much greed in the future and how that could come back into the moment and then affect the trade because of greed. Also, fear about what the future might hold. Also, memories of pain in the past that are coming forward to influence a trade. That's not good. And moments of excessive pleasure, or where we had a great trade that we remember that comes in and influences what we're trying to do, which is simply to be mindful about the current trade. And so we mapped out this idea that maybe there is some region in which, as long as I'm inside approximately this space, I'm good enough to trade. And so we do a systematic visualization and feeling process to remember what those moments are like in our personal past, so that we can identify them and know where we are at any given time, and then develop the mental and emotional skills to get us back into the zero state, and then really to find out for each individual what is the optimum state. This one happens to be mine right here, leaning forward a little bit and slightly on the confidence side, positive feelings, not right on the zero line itself, but in a positive zone, where I can. And so my goal in trading is to put myself there and keep myself in there. Well, today's lesson from Fletcher was a discussion of how there is some space between relaxation and maximum stress, where the extra pressure that you feel is encouraging your creativity and speculation, and that you can practice getting into that state and learning to make decisions under pressure. That's one of the reasons we scrimmage, and we, play at a heightened rate of pressure so that we get used to game-like conditions. It's the reason in judo you randori and you roll in jiu-jitsu, is to get used to putting those um, those moves and behaviors under game-like conditions, so you're not surprised in the competition. Train as you would fight. Trade as you would trade. That's why it's my argument that the best trade simulator is the market with live money, because it removes all of the artificiality, and then you can scale your anxiety as a function of how much money you have under risk, and then learn to scale that. And so today's exercise was really a challenge to find out where this emotional state of increased stress for trading and where to place it on our personal zero state mind map. And those were the Fletcher exercises. On my exercise, there was a really handy trade management template in which there was some ideas arrayed where you had some kind of trade pattern that you initiated, and then you get time and performance, and that we would say that, hey, if it does this and gets to my price target right away, that would be an A trade. If it took this long, it would be a B trade, and then a C trade, and then maybe a D trade, and then a E or an F trade. And that there was some kind of minimum quality trade that says, hey, as long as it's meeting those lines, I'm still in it, or maybe it's just under the C trade. And then as price was moving out, and the trade, instead of just being the pattern that you were trading, is now becoming the trade that it is, you want to be able to look through this lens to see how it's performing against the standard template and say, hey, how good is this trade? Do I want to stay in it? And by adding that extra lens, it acts like a filter between you and the actual trade, and it allows you to create a little bit of standoff, this lens, this framework, this template, and that way you don't get emotionally connected to the trade itself, and then you can manage from a state of disconnectedness from your emotion and connectedness to your evaluation, because you're using a standard form, a standard template, in order to judge that particular trade. And that's a learnable skill. That's what we meant by learn to disassociate yourself from the trade by looking through the lens of a standard trade template. And through that process of continuous management and checking the trade against the pattern, you learn to create a bit of space for yourself so that you can evaluate the trade in the moment without your ego involved. You want to be able essentially to disconnect your emotion and ego in order to connect your critical judgment. So part of that is protection against your monkey mind. This is, how do you detect incoming stress? What is the signal that alerts you? How do your senses shift in intensity or priority when you're in the heightened state? Are you a visual, audio, or physical responder to those kinds of stresses? What are the signals that stress is coming in into your little battle space, into your zero state? What are those warning signs? Are they feelings in your breathing or your vision or the palm of your hands? So one of the reasons that we do this exercise, to go back and find those other emotional moments in trading and dive into them, is to discover what exactly is the signal of your subconscious mind or emotional mind that wants to come in and rock the boat of your practical trading mind. Can you be aware of your breathing and the feeling of the palms of your hands? What is your metronome? You know, if this trade management is beating right along and you're checking the trade periodically, what is the process that ensures that you are doing that systematic management. How often do you check your mirrors when you're driving? How often do you get mindful? Do you use something? I use hand grippers or anxiety balls or fidget spinners so that I can stay grounded in the moment. And when I feel energy coming in from fear or greed or anxiousness, I can use my little hand trainers as a heavy stainless steel thing that it actually not only acts as a fidget spinner, but it has enough heft and weight to it that it actually helps me with carpal tunnel syndrome and helps train my hands, and actually has a physical therapeutic payoff. So the act of becoming mindful is actually strengthening me. Then in our true story notes, I was talking about my transition through the holiday seasons where I felt like I was just kind of idling, and the new feelings of cranking up the diesel and getting ready to work. So the whole session lasts about 2.5 hours. The notes are on Patreon for you to review. This particular session, we went ahead and documented everybody's testimony. So Tom Sullivan was exploring neurology, emotion of his own creativity under pressure, and how the words that we use to contain those emotions get connected into narratives and stories. And then we have learned that if you change your story, you can change the meaning of it. And so we can repurpose our experiences and reorganize those stories to reinforce the lessons that we want. And since every trade can become a high pressure situation, this is a high payoff. And one of the important moments in there is some discussions about relating this management of self to under pressure to be like the engineer on a train, raising steam in the boiler. So for that train to work, he's got to raise steam inside the boiler to create power to drive the wheels. And so that is water that's heated and is under pressure and is fed by this coal tinder. And they're just shoveling coal to put it into the firebox to raise the heat so that we can raise steam. And so that is water under pressure, but that's what gives you the energy to perform work. Yeah, but what happens if it just blows up? Well, that's where I have to have a pressure regulation valve, and I got to know where my red line is, red zone, and then I've got some kind of operating range between 0 and something, and as long as my steam is in here, I have enough steam to work, and I'm staying away from the red zone where the boiler is under extra pressure and may blow up. Is it enough just to have a gauge? No, we actually talked about the idea of visualizing and describing some kind of pressure release valve, automatic, so that as steam is building up in pressure, there's a little metal ball that sits in here that has a certain weight to it. And when the pressure of the steam is too great, it is strong enough to raise that little ball. And when that ball gets raised up in the tube, now suddenly the excess steam can escape, brings it back into tolerance, and then the little ball comes back down and automatically seals. So we want to create the same kind of automatic pressure relief valve inside our own emotional state, so that we're not just waiting for other people to watch our little indicator, but we have something that is actually responding to stress. And so knowing what those warning signs are and then engaging activities that help us manage that stress mentally, physically, and emotionally, like this, allows us to continue to stay in that effective operating zone. It's like a pressure cooker. where you can really cook well. But again, you've got that pressure inside, and there's a little pressure release valve. So as it heats, this stays inside the optimum heat and pressure conditions so that we can do the cooking that we want. Ernie talked about some memories of being under pressure 50 years ago that came to the surface in a story for his internal reflection, and how he still remembers the idea of the cold sweats and anxiety, which he was then able to realize that the way his body responded to that stress event 50 years ago is the same response that his body has learned to use to stress today. And so by remembering the physical feelings of it, he's now able to identify the signals that stress has been triggered and wants to shift him away from his zero state. Chun-Long Lee, as always, did some amazing work connecting his trigger word from a couple weeks ago about SWOT, these strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat model that we use to evaluate our current posture, and did some serious work and realized that he was kind of terrified by it a little bit, because he was thinking, at his age, a young man in his 50s, what if I change my course at this time in my life? Do I want to change? Or were there some things that he could do with the strengths and weaknesses and just work on the things that were weak in order to protect his ability to put strength on an opportunity and win? So he realized that he had choices that he could make about how much change he actually wanted, and that would set up the parameters of a successful strategy, was to be respectful of his values that are at the center of all this stuff. There's that the person in the middle who is engaging in purposeful behavior has values that are to be supported in goals and objectives. And so he could focus on the external opportunities and threats, compare them to his internal strengths and weaknesses in order to come up with strategies that would allow him to do better on the things that he values. He's working on finding that middle way that balances intraday trading and swing trading, because he doesn't want to always sit in front of the screen. He did some visualizations about what could happen if he tried one strategy or another, and he went through a series of scenarios. And he realized a really important mindset with three components that came out of this, that by being in charge of himself and his own process, that he really had the freedom to step away from trades, and that he could achieve a state of mind of no judgment and no resistance. So in other words, freedom, acceptance, and surrender, to simply allow his trade process and his systems and their notes, which he's invested in, time and effort into, he could surrender to that and learn to trust that, so that those things could perform on the trade, and that he could keep his ego out of it and simply learn to let that whole process work. And so learning to operate under stress and still be creative was an important part of his work. Kyun's insight, among others, I thought was really useful, was that he was able to look at that diagram that we had drawn with the different layers of performance. And it's in the form of a sketch. And so he was able actually to look at that through his eyes and make sense of what the diagram was saying without being told, without being on the receiving end of a lecture. So he has learned to actually look at the art to make meaning. So he's an actor in the sense making, rather than just waiting to be told what the truth was. So, and that is a reactor. So we want to move from being reactors to actors when it comes to making sense of what it is that we're seeing. And so he has now learned enough about our standard work and patterns and systems and rules that he can now start doing his own interpretation. Sonal's work I thought was amazing as usual. And one of her research project from years ago that is still coming back to remind us how important it is that she sort of has a combination of a hunter and a farmer inside her trading process. And when she puts the trade on, both of those little parts are at work. And the hunter wants to get the big win and get out, and the farmer wants to let that thing grow throughout the whole growing season, where the hunter wants to strike and capture. And so she's developing ways in which to handle both of those. And what she's found that is after a certain degree of successful performance, that she can take off a piece of the trade in order to satisfy the hunter enough to get past no lose plus dinner for two, which now creates lesser anxieties in her mindset, which allows the farmer to do what the farmer does. Because if you only do one or the other, there will be times when you look back and say, oh, my hunter grabbed it too soon and I missed the extra gains. And then other times the farmer say, hey, I stuck around so long trying to grow the crop, I missed the earliest opportunity where the value really was, and I really didn't get anything out of the farmer. So which one is right? Well, she's showing in her work how to get the best of both of those. And in many ways, that was similar to the idea of the pressure release valve, in which you got that pressure cooker or your boiler that's cooking along inside here, raising steam. And then if it gets to be too much and it's moving you out of your zero state, then that automatic pressure release valve will raise that ball in the tube so that the steam can escape. And then when pressure is normalized, it'll fall back down and then allow you to stay in that operating zone of the farmer for the long-term endurance. So she's committing to drawing that as a sketch, and then she's going to use that art as a reminder of her triggers. I'm not going to cover all those because the notes are all in the attachment on Patreon. But my my takeaways from there, a couple that I wanted to highlight was this important one about the trading channel goes from the turn of the RL10 to the turn of the RL10, and that defines the channel, and that channel has to be 4 MMRBs wide to be tradable from inside the channel, or in other words, qualifying the width of the channel. So if you think about that like this, if we had the market open, let's say right there, let's say it closed yesterday here and maybe it gapped open down here, and then price is going to do something like this. The RL10 is the smoothed moving regression line that traces the line of price. Now, the way the RL10 works is when it shifts direction, this comes to a very specific measurable point. And it makes a sharp point. So you can actually now, when you see that point to point, you now have the width of the price channel has been established by where price actually reversed today, this morning, in this particular trade. I'm talking intraday trade, but the insight we talked about today was that whatever your MMRB is, this thing has to be 4 boxes in width or height, so that after the turning point, you can make an entry that risks one box. And then probably on the other end, you probably have some rule that that exits, let's just say after an MMRB. So you end up giving back one on the entry and one on the exit. So that means you have to have two boxes in the middle so that your 1 unit of risk has an opportunity for 2 units of gain, and hopefully it gets past 2, and then you can make an exit up in here. So that the width of that intraday trading box needs to be 4 in order for you to trade between the turning points of the RL10 under normal conditions. You would think of that as an SSC or even a K2. Because the way you're managing that during the day is when that RL10 is making moves, where you are treating, if that's 4 boxes inside here, then I can trade inside that channel. One of the ideas of of the gap, it closes and then opens. In that early moment, if I have the MMRB on here, I know that from where it opened, it can move 10 R10s. So if I take that as the range stat, and I divide the range stat by 10 and make that my MMRB, I know that this thing can go 10 boxes in either direction. And if I'm bracketing that with a from the open, let it go 1 box or 1 box, I still have 9 to potentially a new high or low of the day, and I have more than a sufficient implied range so that I can trade right from the opening with that tight range box. But if I don't take that right away, if I wait to see a strong move, let's say this thing sells off and then starts to reverse, well, now this is where the conditions of that SSC occur. Was it a sufficiently large move? That's where we would say, hey, did it move 4 MMRBs? So that if it just closes the gap, there's my 4 boxes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I have that tradable channel within which I can take those trades. But on the other hand, as long as I have not exceeded a range stat in either direction, I can count the number of boxes that are still available. I have a pretty quick rule of thumb about when I can trade or when I don't trade. So that's what we mean by having that lens to look at the performance of the trade, or to look at the structure of the trade frame, and it allows you to create a little disconnection from the emotions of it. It has to be right. No, it just has to meet the scaffolding that we set up, and then I can manage it through that lens and create the standoff distance to be a professional manager. That's what we meant by the trade frame is scaffolding, a template for judgment. And it's a map at the start of where the trade might go. And then as it goes and it is becoming the trade that it will be, it's no longer just a pattern, it's a specific trade that you can judge to decide, hey, am I going to keep this one or when do I get out? So very straightforward. The template, the professional tool, gives us the ability to stand off and create the professional mindset. Now, this was a really important discussion, and it's worth going to Patreon to listen to. We were talking about sniper trading as a frame of mind. So, let's say I'm a sniper up here on my hill and I'm getting ready to shoot at that target that I have framed in the usual way, which means that it is in a that's a trade that is in a compound critical state. So I have a target list over here of symbols that are all in compound critical states. And I frame all of those with the particular entries and exits. And because it's a compound critical state, it can go large in either direction. It could go higher or lower, many multiples of the MMRB. And my target list, everything on that target list is poised to make a much larger than normal move in short periods of time in either direction. And so all I have to do is wait for the target to leave the box, take the shot, and then manage the trade. Now, here's what today's insight was about. That it's a compound critical state because over multiple time frames, the 150-day look back, the 30-day look back, the 10-day look back, the 1-day look back, all of the traders that are using any one of those look-back periods tends to be a certain kind of a trader. One day, an intraday trader, a fast swing trader on 5 days, medium and slow swing traders on 10 and 30, position traders on 150. Each one of those folks is looking at the same target, and each one of them finds that it's in a critical state for them, meaning that it's ready to break down or reverse hard, and the volatility is either abnormally large or abnormally small. What makes it a compound critical state is that all of these time frames are feeling heightened states of emergency. So if there's 1,000 traders watching that symbol, how many of them are actually snipers that have this mentality of using multiple time frame? Maybe one. Maybe it's you. So what you're actually doing is you're not trading the symbol so much as you are trading all of the little emotional traders who all have their own reasons to become very emotional. Once that thing starts moving, the folks who were betting on the upside are all going to be emotional and wanting to pile on. And then all of the folks who are on the other way are in fear and panic and are trying to get out. And so that leads to that rising steam and the explosion of the move. Because you've selected symbols that are in a compound critical state and know how to carefully define your target range, you're actually trading on the emotions of others and not on the symbol as a disinterested. The stock doesn't know. It's just the stock. It doesn't have any inherent qualities. All of the movement is implied in the feelings and the actions of the people who are trading it. So the secret of the sniper there is that you know exactly as a sniper how all those guys feel, because you've gone through the training of knowing what it is like to be anxious, nervous, worried about the trade that you're working on. That's what 100% of all the other traders are feeling. The difference between you and them is that you've created the sniper mindset that puts you into a safe spot, has identified the best possible target to take advantage of the unprofessional feelings of the mob who want to turn that thing into some kind of runaway move to the upside or downside. So they're always surprised. It's like a little jack-in-the-box, that little spring-loaded thing and it has the handle on the side and it's turning round and round. And then all of a sudden, you know that thing's spring-loaded, and at some point the top is going to pop off, boom, and the snakes in the can or the little jack-in-the-box is going to jump out, and that's going to spook the herd But that's not going to spook you because you know that's going to happen and you're prepared to take the shot as soon as it comes out of the box, and you know how to manage the stop for the length of the move. So the sniper mentality has everything to do with the psychology of the sniper, understanding the psychology of the other traders, and realizing that you're one out of 1,000 traders who has the ability to professionally manage your emotions. You're able to disassociate your emotions and ego from the decision making in the trade. You've been able to put a wedge in between impulse and action. You recognize the feelings of impulse because you know the feelings that the traders have. You just have that wedge of the sniper training so that you take the action properly as a sniper to exploit the situation and not to get caught up in the running of the herd. So 100% of the sniper mentality has to do with why it's different to be a sniper than to be one of 1,000 members of a psychologically unstable, emotion-ridden herd, and that has many different demographics, around the pie. Because it's a compound critical state, you know that there's an extraordinarily large number of folks who are ready to contribute to this thing exploding. And when it does move, that's why those folks are typically surprised by the size of the move, but you're not, because all you've done is narrowed it down to the smallest piece of indecision, that if it breaks out of that sniper box, then chances are there's that large move in either direction, which you can manage in a risk-managed way and just take your pieces as you go, and you don't have a directional bias. So if it starts out one way and then reverses, goes the other way, that's also typical behavior. So you don't have to worry about being right or wrong about what direction it takes. Just use good, sound trade management principles. Don't stay wrong too long. Know where your entry and reversal marks are, and that's the essence of sniper trading. So it's worthwhile listening to that speech in the moment. And remember, you know exactly how those other traders feel who are not snipers. And so now what it means is you have to feel the feelings of professionalism for yourself. So one of our participants this morning is a professional truck driver. And he's driven those trucks so often that if there's a loading dock over here and there's a bunch of trucks lined up, and he comes into the yard with his truck, he can tell at a moment whether or not there's enough room in here for him to set up his truck and then back it in professionally. He's done that thousands of times, and he can tell by inspection. Now, if in his snap judgment that is not wide enough for him to back his truck into, that little fact that he can't back that truck into that spot, that doesn't make him question, oh, maybe I'm not a truck driver. Maybe I can't do this for a living. He says, no, I know exactly what I can do. I'm not going to risk putting my truck into that spot. I'm going to go down here and take the slot that I can put it in so I can complete the load without error and then move on to the next load. So he knows, he has an internal guide that's gone through all of these case studies and knows exactly what he can do. And that creates feeling, that's an internal guide that establishes exactly what it means to feel professional, to know that you're professional. What does that feel like? And now he can take exactly that template, and that as he's going up the hill learning about trading, he knows that at this particular moment in time, that level of learning is not to the professional level that would satisfy his internal guide. So he knows internally that he's not ready to drop truck driving as a living and adopt a trading mentality, but he knows exactly what it's going to take for him to continue to get to the spot where his internal guide is satisfied that he is professional and that he can perform these functions as a trader the same way he performs it as a driver. So that's not a reason to despair. Do you know how many other people know exactly what it means to be professional? Not many. You take 1,000 people in the world, how many of them are actually professionals? 5%? That means 95% of the traders have no internal guide to know exactly what being a professional means. That means that they have not figured out how to master their own emotions and still perform under pressure at a high rate of skill. That means 95% of the traders are out there are always going to be those little herd animals around the doji or the compound critical state who are captivated and controlled by their own emotions, and that you as the sniper can respond to the movement of the target and trust in the fact that the emotional pluses and minuses of that herd are going to cause that thing to move sharply. So what's important here is for you to recognize the importance of feeling professional. Exactly. We talked about there was a answer, or there was a exercise in the foundations class about amateur versus professional. And that's just really important. You need to know what your internal guide thinks is the required level of professionalism to give you the confidence to be able to just rapidly drive the truck and back it in there, knowing that you can get that done and that you can repeat that 1,000 times with certain variations based on, without ever jeopardizing your identity and performance as a professional. You're only going to get better the more you trade if you have a learning plan that allows you to extract the learning value out of each one of those trades. Remember, those trades are not just earning R for money, they are also earning R for learning. And that the active assessment allows you to increase your learning so that your skill level continues to climb. You get better the more you trade if you are learning in the proper framework. So that was a really important discussion that we had that's worth listening to. I'm going to upload that to the Foundations course because it was so good. So I wanted to make sure that we just got that locked in on the in our little nightly podcast. So I'm not going to cover all of these things, but every one of these from all the participants and our discussion made this a really special lesson today. And so just as an update, so the folks who started this journey last June have just completed lesson 28 of 30. So they got 2 more weeks to go of the 2 final lessons. And then we're going to start a new cohort. And what's going to happen in that new cohort is that when the new folks start, they're working on lesson 1 and then 2 and then 3. And in each lesson, there is an Angus Fletcher exercise. There's a long trading exercise. And there's work for you to do and to reflect on. But there's now also the Euro session where all of these guys agreed to record their sessions for insights. And so you have the true story circle of the Euros and of the US guys. And there's about 100 extra hours of amazing discussion and learning that supplements the amazing Fletcher and Long work. And what we're going to do now is when the new cohort starts, there's going to be the new folks that come in that are working on lessons 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then some of the older folks have agreed to come back. And as they continue to do their work in progress, they'll be bringing in their stories to tell in the True Story Circle. And the folks working on that particular lesson will tell theirs. And we think that the crosstalk of everybody sitting around the circle, especially folks that are veterans that have done that before, plus the stuff they're working on, you're going to get an amazing popcorn effect where the implications are, it's almost like a compound critical state, only there's no negatives, because this, we're raising the heat, and the pressure cooker of creativity is going to cause all of these ideas to come bubbling out, and then you get to have a lifetime access to all that and put those things on your to-do list for learning and research, which leads to work, which leads to that increased skill performance as you ascend the trading skill mountain. And you're doing it in a community of practice that knows all these things already and is mutually reinforcing and is there to help everybody succeed. That's why I call this thing it's actually the continuous coaching program. Maybe I just call that, maybe it's the compound coaching program, because we've got people from all of the different time frames of experience and expertise all contributing to each other's mutual benefit from many different perspectives, and the amount of creativity that comes out of that's going to be extraordinary. All right, so that's everything I wanted to say about that, and I'll get this published and posted, and I'll be taking snippets out of today's session to isolate the particular lessons for rapid learning. But I would encourage you to go to Patreon. You can download that session and this set of notes, and I would commend it to your attention. Whether you take Creativity 202 or not, today's session was so good that it's our gift to you that you really want to, I think, pay close attention to the things we were talking about. They were foundational. All right, that's everything I got. You take good care, and we shall see you tomorrow. Oh, by the way, I put for subscribers, I put $1,000 discount coupon onto Patreon also. It's important to me that people take that course. So that's my contribution to the team.